Welcome in, everyone, and thank you for listening to the 2022 Bass Pro Tournament of Champions recap special. We went to the tournament. We watched it all 3 days, more or less, and we're here to tell you what happened, give some reflections on some of the games, talk about some of the standout players and players that we think you should keep an eye on as far as their college careers and beyond. So we'll just jump right into it. We kind of had a feeling that, Sierra Canyon was going to maybe run away with this thing. And then watching the teams play a little bit, it seemed even more like that was probably the case. But spoiler alert, they got second place. They lost to Paul 6 in the championship round.
What?
But we're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves because there were some really good games throughout the tournament. Very first game of the tournament, Whitney Young from Chicago, Illinois beat New Madrid County, Missouri. And Whitney Young set a single game record for team block shots. I believe they had 14 blocks in that game.
Mm-hmm.
And that was just like a producer Cameron and I watched that one. That was like just a mismatch as far as like play styles. And Whitney Young was like maybe the longest team in the tournament. And all New Madrid could do was drive the ball. And they just
and that
kept
just looked
getting
like
rejected.
that's what they probably do like during the course of their season is they just
are
really good at driving the ball, getting to the basket, getting fouled, and
it
winning
was
games
not,
that way.
Yeah, it was not going well for them against Whitney Young. Whitney Young had the senior A.J. Casey, who's going to Miami. Jadis Jones, the best player for New Madrid, is just a sophomore. And so I felt like you could definitely see in that matchup that Jones was the younger player. He just kind of, you could tell physically he could compete with this school, but it just looked like a team of seniors kind of putting this smaller, younger team in their place.
Well, we kind of talked about it when we were at the tournament, and Whitney Young just seems like there's no like all-star player, super well-rounded team.
Yeah.
Fairly deep bench, it seemed like.
Right.
And
they didn't need A.J. Casey to go off for them to play pretty well. Yeah, I would agree. So Whitney Young won that first game of the tournament. Then Sierra Canyon played Parkview, and Sierra Canyon won that game, obviously. And then
Parkview was winning at halftime, though.
That is true. Parkview gave him a fight, and Parkview's coach was incredibly animated on the sidelines, and he obviously recognized this opportunity for his team to beat one of the best teams in the country, and so he was getting pretty fired up.
They played really well, and honestly, I feel like all of the teams from the Springfield area played very well, represented themselves well in this entire tournament.
Yeah, the wins and losses actually didn't show that if you just look at the bracket, but they played a lot better than the results actually showed. I agree. And Nixa did that in their very first game against Milton. Nixa had this game won, and then Milton won the game on a 3-point buzzer beater.
It was wild.
They were down 2, and their point guard kind of drove towards the top of the key and then passed it back to Bruce Thornton, who's a Ohio State commit, and he just nailed a 3-pointer from the Missouri State Bears logo to win the game at the buzzer.
Yeah, whenever his teammate kind of shoveled it back to him with time almost expiring, I was like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
But it was perfectly timed, and he, like you said, just nailed the 3. So it almost looked like rehearsed. Like that was like the plan from the get-go. Yeah,
it was reminiscent of like Villanova in the NCAA tournament when they won the championship on a buzzer beater. It was that kind of that pitch back for a long 3 from the inbounder. And they were only down by 2, so I thought that what was his name? Carlisle was just going to drive for the tie, but then he kicked it out for the win. It was an awesome moment. The crowd that first night was very much pro Nixa, being the local team, but the place.
It still erupted.
Got loud when that game winner went down. And then the last game of that first night was Paul 6 against Springfield Catholic. So eventual champions only beat Springfield Catholic by 5 points. And they did what so many other top tier teams have done in this tournament, and that is seemingly not scouted the local team they're playing against in the first round.
Yep.
Because if you know anything at all, if you've watched 5 minutes of Springfield Catholic basketball, you know they are going to feed Zach Howell. He's going to shoot the ball most of the time. He's going to shoot deep threes and make them. And that's what he was doing against Paul Six. And they didn't figure it out until almost too late that they basically needed to have a guy like hugging him and face guarding him the entire time. They did that more in the second half. And
yeah, they were just letting him shoot the first half.
Yeah. Like they hadn't scouted whatsoever.
Legitimately, I think they just did not know who Zach Howell was. Yeah. I just don't think they did not do the scouting report. But they learned pretty quickly.
Yeah, let's talk about Howell for a little bit here. So he had a really good tournament. I think he finished with like close to 70 points total in the tournament, and 74 points. And he was knocking down shots from all over the place, really deep threes. He was impacting the game on the defensive end as well, and I think he looked the part of what we've seen in years past of a local kid that can perform well against just about anybody and is going to go D1 for sure, most likely Power 5. He claims an offer from Texas Tech, according to his Twitter. That would be his only Power 5 offer. He says he's heard from Mizzou, but this seems like the type of player that is worth keeping in your home state if you're Conzo Martin and the Missouri Tigers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, whenever games were in crunch time, I mean, he was taking every shot and making a lot of them. I mean, the defense knew he was about to shoot, and this goes for this game, but even later in the tournament too. Yeah. When they were in a close game, he was taking the shot. Even if he was well covered, he was finding a way to get a shot off.
Yeah, and I actually can't remember. We'll just kind of segue into the consolation bracket from here, because I can't remember if it was in this game or their consolation round matchup against Nixa in the second round. They only lost that one by 3. Nixa won that game 56-53. I can't remember which game it was, but they were basically forcing the ball to him on multiple inbound plays, and he was like double covered and falling away from 26 feet from the basket, shooting a 3-pointer at the buzzer, and it just never really looked great. But we kind of wondered coming out of a timeout or something if they were going to try to use him as a decoy and get the ball to somebody else. And they have a point guard who was able to at least read the defense well enough to know, okay, they're just locked onto Zach. I'm just going to drive for an easy 2. Mm-hmm. And he did that a couple of times, but when they really needed that 3-point shot to fall, he was pretty well covered up, but he was forcing up shots anyway. But that's pretty much all they could do at that point.
Yeah, I mean, he was working.
Yeah.
In some respect.
Yeah. So in the consolation side of the bracket, Parkview beat New Madrid by 3 on Friday. Nixa beat Springfield Catholic by 3. And then Nixa beat Parkview by 4 to take home 5th place.
Which we predicted correctly.
Yes.
All 3 of us in our bracket.
All 3 of us had that nailed. And then New Madrid beat Springfield Catholic to get 7th place. I think I had that the other way around in my bracket prediction. But Catholic, they lost by 11. The final round only scored 39 points. They maybe were a little bit done with the tournament at this point. Usually that 7th place game is it's like at 2:30 on Saturday. So,
well, they were a fill-in.
That's true.
Team. They were saying like, I don't know exactly.
They weren't originally on the tournament roster.
But they're like, hey, we need an extra team, and obviously they're going to call a local team because they don't have to travel. But
right. Yeah, no, I thought especially not only for a local team, but for being like an extra, basically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and they had one of the highest scoring players in the tournament.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, I mean, was he the highest scoring player in the tournament? I think you have that tabulated over there, Cameron.
Yeah.
He was?
Tied.
Oh, wow.
But we'll get there.
Oh, okay. So, looking over to the winner's bracket, I thought that Whitney Young was going to give Sierra Canyon a game in the second round. I thought that their athleticism, their length, and they they had a kid, number 25. I can't remember his name. He's not being recruited at the D1 level or anything, but he was a really good three-point shooter. But they basically just got run off the floor against Sierra Canyon. This was Sierra Canyon's best game in the tournament. They scored 81 points. They really got out in transition a ton and just got to the rim, got to the free throw line. Their defense kind of shut down Whitney Young. In the second half especially, the scoring was pretty lopsided. So that made me think that Sierra Canyon was going to go all the way. But also, I was disappointed in the performance from Whitney Young because they looked pretty solid in the first round.
Mm-hmm.
Then in the second round, we had almost another game-winning buzzer beater from the same kid for Milton. So Milton against Paul VI. That was kind of an interesting matchup because it was two teams with similar play styles, not a whole lot of outside shooting, a lot of driving, a lot of free throws. And in the very end, Milton had the ball with like 3 seconds left. Same kid, Bruce Thornton, going to Ohio State, takes a shot to win the game. It is perfectly on line, but bounces off the back of the rim. And he is actually really funny. Kyle and I were watching that game, and Kyle, you said, like, really, Ohio State? Like, I don't know that I see Ohio State in this kid. And then he just like immediately goes on like a solo 8-0 run to get Milton back in the game.
Yeah, it may. I don't know when exactly it said that. Maybe it was at that point, but I will admit, at some point in this tournament, I was not sold on Bruce Thornton, and he was not impressing me. And athletically, I don't know how like explosive he is, but man, in the clutch, he really came up. He was making huge shots, and just like when they really needed buckets, he was there every single time. And he totally made me eat those words pretty quickly after I said them. And I would honestly say that was a false statement by me. I definitely think he's a Ohio State level caliber player. He's very good.
Yeah, he hadn't quite turned it on when you first said that, and then he just like immediately flipped a switch and like mounts the comeback almost by himself. So Milton did end up losing. He did not make the game winner. They did win the third place game against Whitney Young, but and he was really good in that game.
He went off.
Yeah.
He had 34 points, and that put him at 74 as well. So him and Zach Howell had 74 for the tournament.
Probably should have been the MVP.
Nah, it's possible. We might talk about MVP voting in a little bit. But talking about Milton as a team, obviously they also had five-star junior Kanan Carlisle. He didn't really show up for this tournament.
Yeah, he was almost like the opposite of Bruce Thornton in the way that he was like a freak athlete. He was super bouncy and was making some very athletic-looking plays, but really didn't show up when it mattered and didn't really score. He wasn't very productive in the tournament. Obviously, Bruce Thornton, pretty much the complete opposite.
Yeah. So that was kind of disappointing. He, Carlisle, five-star junior, already committed to Stanford. So, I don't know, maybe not a whole lot to prove, but they were, really competing to try to win this tournament, and offensively, Carlisle just wasn't really bringing much to the table, unfortunately. And what's the gentleman's name that's a defensive lineman?
Lebius Overton.
Overton, yes.
LT,
as he goes by in the program. He did not contribute offensively like I thought he might. He was a very large human, though.
and very nimble for as large as he is.
Oh, he's going to be a great NFL player, I'm sure.
Yeah. So, he definitely looked like a football player out there, though. But, I don't know. I think just like the athletic pedigree required to be that highly ranked maybe elevated his basketball playing ability in my mind a little too much. Because really, in this whole tournament, it was Bruce Thornton and then not a whole lot of contributions from anybody else offensively. So I was a little bit disappointed to see that, but he held zone and almost single-handedly got them to the championship game. So in the championship, we had Sierra Canyon and Paul VI, and I thought this was going to be an easy Sierra Canyon win.
Yeah, me too.
So we haven't really talked about any of their players very much yet. So Amari Bailey is their 5-star forward who, kind of small forward type player who can do just about anything. And he had some quiet but decent scoring outputs in the first 2 games. He was scoring double digits, 15, 16 points, but nothing too flashy, just kind of under the radar. But his team was winning, so it wasn't really that big of a deal. And then Bronny James, almost nowhere to be found in the first 2 games. He's a starter on their team. We talked about in the preview, he's not like a 5-star player, and he's still just a junior, kind of maybe deferring to some of the seniors on the squad. But he was nowhere to be found the first 2 games. Amari Bailey didn't look incredible, but productive enough to keep him going. And obviously they have an insanely deep bench and just kind of insane athletes to kind of power them through the first 2 matchups.
Amari Bailey was interesting because, like you said, he still was productive, but it was fairly quiet. It was what it felt like. But whenever he wanted to score, it felt like he could. And so I feel like I almost wanted to see more out of him. I think his ceiling is very high. He's a very polished high school player, great athlete, very explosive, and could just get to the rim with ease, just power through people without like running them over.
Super smooth
Very
with
smooth.
like switching hands in the air,
Yeah.
Euro steps, spin
I think
moves.
they could have gotten a lot more out of him, and I'm honestly like I kind of feel like the championship game was just a complete missed opportunity for them. They really, in my opinion, should have won the game, and I think Amari Bailey could have been a much bigger part of that game than he was.
Well, we saw kind of when it came down to crunch time, we saw it was a 2-man show. And all of a sudden, Bronny James just flipped a switch, and he decided he was going to start scoring the ball. And it was just, I don't know how many possessions in a row. It was either Amari Bailey or Bronny James taking the shot. And it was kind of bizarre. And now maybe this is just high school basketball, and I don't watch a ton of high school basketball, but these guys were just, like you said, getting to the rim with ease, but just not finishing very well. Just missing layups and not always getting fouled. That championship game was kind of had a weird feel to it. Like the rhythm of the game was kind of
the whole first half was just like strange. Lots of fouls, slow pace, and I feel like, especially Sierra Canyon, that's not their like ideal style of play.
Not at all, yeah.
And yeah, I mean, calling it strange is probably the best thing to call it. I don't know, like.
Yeah, it wasn't a very free-flowing, smooth game. There was a lot of stoppages, a lot of fouls. Paul Six was playing a zone defense, which kind of gave Sierra Canyon trouble. And they, because, for a while, Paul Six had more points from free throws than they did shots from the field.
Yeah.
And so
it was very lopsided.
Yeah, the fouls were a little lopsided in the first half, and it just seemed like Sierra Canyon needed turnovers or missed shots to get out and run in transition and not allow the defense to set up in their zone. And so many fouls were getting called that every Sierra Canyon possession for a while was starting from a dead ball throw-in. So, yeah, really kind of strange first half, not a lot of rhythm or flow to the game. The second half definitely improved in that regard. Sierra Canyon mounted a comeback by getting out in transition and forcing some turnovers. And then a weird thing happened. Somewhere in the second half there, Bronny James got fouled and goes to the free throw line, and an overrated chant starts breaking out among the fans, some of the fans in JQH Arena. Definitely noticeable. Like it was
very loud.
A fairly loud chant. Now, this was like 5 minutes after he kind of had the biggest cheer.
Yeah.
I would say it was a bigger crowd reaction than even the game winner, because that was such a that was like the late game the first night. There weren't that many fans still left at that point. But he had the biggest like applause of the entire tournament when he got a fast break dunk and just like effortlessly rose up for a big tomahawk dunk.
Or even whenever,
awesome.
That was a great dunk.
That was awesome.
Or even whenever they were like announcing the starting lineup and everything, he got like a huge ovation from the crowd.
So then this overrated chant starts to break out, and I don't know. I'm kind of like looking around, like, who is doing this? Like, what are you doing? Like, we
pretty uncomfortable.
are like asking these premier high school players to come play here, and they're like, 16, 17 years old.
And I don't even think Bronny James is like, he's not known necessarily for his basketball playing.
Right.
It's his dad, you know, like obviously he's not like super highly ranked. We talked about that.
Yeah.
I don't know that he's overrated really.
Right. And he kind of shut people up towards the end of the championship game. I wish now that we had seen this version of him all tournament long, because he turned it on and like found another gear kind of in the fourth quarter of the championship game, where he was getting to the rim, getting fouled, making shots, making threes, and Amari Bailey was doing a lot of the same, but they just couldn't finish enough shots around the rim to complete the comeback.
Yeah, they got close.
Yeah, very close. It was like, if it was like one possession closer with like 5 minutes left in the game, then I think we would have been in for a really fun ending. But there was just enough separation. It was like 7-point game with 5 minutes left, where Sierra Canyon kind of had to start fouling early, and they just couldn't score enough late to really complete the comeback. But I think they had one opportunity. Like Bronny missed a three that would have cut it to a one possession game. Maybe would have made it a 3-point game. So they just couldn't quite get it done. Final score in that one was 72-65. So your tournament champions, Paul VI from Virginia. And so we haven't really talked about them very much, but Doug McDaniel, their point guard, veteran now in the Tournament of Champions, because he was in the tournament 2 years ago as a sophomore. And they're like kind of, I just threw my paper across the room. Producer Cameron, who's number 5 for them?
Deshaun Harris-Smith.
Talk about him.
Talk about him.
He was really good.
That was a nicer reach. You were really, that was about as far as you could have possibly reached.
I threw my cheat sheet across the room there. He was, he had to have shot like 15 free throws in the championship game.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I mean, they even like kept fouling him to stop the clock late. And I was like, can we send anybody else to the free throw line? But he had the ball in his hand a lot in that championship game, and he definitely looked confident, like he was the guy that he wanted the ball in his hands. He was going to make plays to put them in position to win.
Well, and overall, I think he maybe even had a better tournament than Doug McDaniel. I think the championship game made it. The first 2 games, I would definitely say that, but I think the championship game, it's like, okay, Doug McDaniel's definitely like what it seems.
Yeah, so McDaniel committed to Michigan. He looked like a Big Ten caliber player just with his quickness and
very
athleticism. And he's not like a super polished point guard, I would say. He wasn't like racking up assists, a ton in this tournament, but he definitely looked the part with his athleticism. Deshaun Harris-Smith still just a junior and uncommitted, so I would not say that he has like, I always think about Trevor Keels from the 2020 Tournament of Champions, that he was just like that obvious junior that you knew was going to take a step and be a significant contributor in college. Deshaun Harris-Smith maybe like half a step behind that, because he didn't quite do everything, but he definitely looks like he may be actually a little bit underrated as a 4-star guard who is not really being recruited by the Blue Bloods necessarily.
Where'd the rating that's on the pre-tournament sheet come from?
24/7 Sports.
He is...
He might be playing for old Kim English at George Mason. No, probably not, but that is one of his listed offers. But
close by, for sure.
Yeah. Also has offers from Georgetown and LSU and Penn State. I would be okay with him not ending up in the SEC.
90 now?
Okay, yeah. So he's already risen.
Jumped up 23 spots.
Yeah.
Just since the tournament?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, he had a really solid performance.
So Paul VI wins the Tournament of Champions. I guess we'll get into the MVP controversy. Now, I think this is only a controversy in our heads because we, ladies and gentlemen listening, we are Tournament of Champions nerds. We enjoy the lore of the Tournament of Champions.
We also get a vote.
We also get to vote for MVP and all tournament team.
Mm-hmm.
So one thing, we're flipping through the book here, the program, and it's showing the results of previous tournaments, and we notice there has the MVP of the tournament has always been a player from the championship team.
100% of the time.
Yeah, without fail. Now, we're filling out our ballots as media, and we have to turn these in before the end of the championship game.
Pretty much before it even started, almost.
Basically, yeah. Like right as it's starting, we have to turn in our ballots. So we don't get to see who's going to win the game, obviously, and we don't get to see performances from Amari Bailey or like Ramel Lloyd, which is another Sierra Canyon player that was doing really well. Kajani Wright was another guy. And
spoiler alert, I didn't even vote for my MVP to be my vote was not even in this game. It was Bruce Thornton from Milton.
So he had tied with Howell for the most points in the tournament and had the game winner against Nixa and almost a game winner, basically single-handedly put them in the championship game, almost. And they do win the third place game that we watched. So all three of us voted for him for MVP. I thought he had the best tournament of any single player. And I guess it's worth mentioning 2 years ago, we all three voted for Aminu Muhammad from Greenwood to be tournament MVP. And that was maybe a stretch considering if you just look at the results of his team in the tournament. I think they won the fifth. They either lost the fifth place game or won the seventh place game, something like that. They were very much not a factor in the semifinals or championship or anything like that. But Aminu Muhammad,
he was the best player in the tournament
by far. He put up a single tournament record 100 rebounds, which is number one in the tournament history. He was third all time in single tournament scoring. He had the most rebounds in a single game in tournament history with 38. I better look this up because I might be getting points and rebounds mixed up.
I think it was 23. I think he was 38 and 23.
38 points, 23 rebound, double-double.
Yeah.
In a game 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Like one of the best single player tournament performances in the history of the tournament.
Yeah.
But
and legitimately a high D1 prospect.
Oh yeah.
He was a top 10 player in his class.
Yeah. And playing well as a freshman for Georgetown this year. But of course, the tournament MVP award goes to the best player on the championship winning team, which was Oak Hill and Cam Thomas.
2 years ago.
Right. So there's a precedent for maybe the best player in the tournament not winning this award.
Yeah.
But there's an interesting situation where if Sierra Canyon had won the championship, then it was pretty obvious that Amari Bailey would be the tournament MVP. Mm-hmm. But
there's a bit of an upset.
Yeah. I don't think anybody expected Paula Six to beat Sierra Canyon in the championship. And I would venture a guess that nobody would have written a player from Paula Six down as their tournament MVP before that game.
0 people wrote down his name.
That's a little bit of speculation, but you don't have to speculate much. There was no reason to select Doug McDaniel or Deshaun Harris-Smith as your MVP before the championship game.
But they won anyway. Well, Doug McDaniel.
What's really interesting is they announced the all-tournament team. Doug McDaniel, who I actually voted for all-tournament team, did not make the all-tournament team. They named 10 other players and then named him tournament MVP. And now usually the tournament MVP is already included in the 10 players that make the all-tournament team. So, again.
So did he literally not qualify for the all-tournament team?
Right. No, he did not get voted
but won
to
the MVP.
Yes.
Just because he was the best player in the last game, basically?
I guess.
I don't know.
So
By
yeah,
whose vote?
like
That's
I
what
said,
we need to know.
we
There's corruption.
yeah, well, this may only be a controversy to the three of us because we're the only ones that are going to take this seriously enough
Well,
to.
it means the vote doesn't matter.
Well, that's kind of what it seems like. So we were talking about we might have to have the tournament director Josh Scott on the podcast next year.
Yeah, I
Oh.
kind of
Interview
have a
him.
feeling if we brought this up to him, he'd kind of just be like, I don't know, guys, it's not that
Yeah.
serious.
Yeah.
Just chill out.
And he would have a very good point if that's what he said.
Yeah.
We just
So-
want to know.
We need answers.
Even if it doesn't matter, we want to know.
We want to hear you say that
Yeah.
there's corruption.
Okay, we're going to make a point to not use the word corruption
Probably not.
when talking to him.
Collusion. That's better.
Anyway, that's us being tournament of champions nerds and getting way too in the weeds on the mechanics there. But having said all of that, Paul Six played a really good championship game. They did exactly what they needed to do to pull off the upset, and they've got two really good guards that are going to be contributors at the next level. We all voted for Bruce Thornton for MVP. I talked about Kanan Carlisle being like maybe my biggest disappointment of the tournament. I would throw obviously Zach Howell out there as maybe, even though I expected him to be the go-to guy for Catholic, he still impressed me and surprised me a little bit about how well he competed against these, better teams. Anybody in particular for you, Kyle, that stood out?
I just realized you said how well.
Yes.
We can go to Cam first.
Okay.
Let me think about it.
I mean, it's easy to say Bruce Thornton.
Yeah.
Especially like going into it. If I'm looking at all these lists of players, he's probably the fourth or fifth guy that I'm like, oh yeah, he'll be fun to watch, but he's probably not the guy that I'm going to be like looking at the most. And he, especially that last game, he just put on a show.
Yeah.
Like, that was awesome.
Absolutely. I was going to just mention Ramel Lloyd. He's only listed as a 3-star player. He's committed to Nebraska, but I thought he was pretty impressive.
Yeah, he definitely held his own on that team.
Yeah, he didn't look like noticeably worse than Amari Bailey most of the time. Bailey definitely had some like flair to his game and just an overall smoothness that honestly looked like an NBA player that Ramel Lloyd didn't really have, but he had definitely easily D1 Power 5 moves and scoring ability.
I'll throw out a guy that was better than advertised, in my opinion, is Colin Ruffin for Nixa, and I think I put him down on my all tournament team. Did he get on the all tournament team?
He did.
And he's not as highly ranked as his teammate, but I thought he had a lot better tournament. Whose name I can't remember the other guy.
Cale Combs. He has a Missouri State offer.
So Ruffin was really good. Honestly, it seems kind of weird to say this, but I thought Amari Bailey was really impressive, and I think that he is a surefire probably one and done after he gets to UCLA. Like you said, he looked like an NBA player out there. He might be a little undersized maybe for the position he was going to play. He would play in the NBA, but I mean, for the most part, I think he's got all the tools he needs. He's a great shooter, and he can get to the basket with ease. He's just a tremendous athlete. About as well-rounded as you could possibly find in a prospect.
Yeah, I agree. Last player I want to spotlight is Jadis Jones for New Madrid. He is just a sophomore, but if you are a fan of Missouri State basketball or even Mizzou basketball like we are, keep an eye on Jadis Jones because he's going to be a D1 prospect, and he's not really being talked about right now. So if he blows up and his recruitment starts to pick up as he becomes an upperclassman, I think the Mizzou coaching staff, from me being a Mizzou fan, I hope the Mizzou coaching staff is keeping an eye on him because even as a sophomore, he looked competitive against these guys that are going to be playing Division I basketball next year. And he's got the size and athleticism, and he would bring the ball up for them a few times during the game and looked okay doing that. Looked like he had pretty good court awareness and everything. Definitely did not look like a sophomore. So maybe watch him if you're interested in Mizzou or Missouri State basketball. Hopefully it's still too early to say exactly where he'll land as far as like what tier of college basketball, but definitely a guy to keep an eye on.
And if you are a Missouri State fan, I don't think it's impossible that Zach Howell goes to a higher level. I think it's very possible he could end up at Missouri State, which I think would be a great get for them. But it's very possible that he could end up in Power 5 somewhere.
All right. Well, congratulations to Paul VI. They're the Tournament of Champions winners for 2022. It was another great tournament. Biggest turnout fan-wise of any tournament in the history of the event. So congratulations to the Springfield area basketball fans that turned out, except for the ones that chanted overrated at Bronny. Don't come back.
No.
We don't need you.
Don't come back.
Other than that, any last thoughts, fellas? Definitely enjoyable.
It's a treat. It's always a treat. I feel like each time we've done it, I've looked forward to it more. So I'm already like pumped to see who's going to be in it next year.
Yeah, I think they'll announce in April. Maybe.
Yeah, they announced like pretty early on. So yeah, it may just be a couple months away.
Terrific. Yeah. Hopefully they'll keep letting us come back.
All right, everybody. You can find our other podcast, or the same podcast, but our other episodes on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Google Podcasts. We're on Twitter at Mizzou Sports Pod, and you can email us at MissouriSportsPod@gmail.com.
You can find Missouri Sports Podcast t-shirts and stickers on our online shop if you want to support us. MissouriSportsPod.BigCartel.com.
You can also support the podcast on Patreon, patreon.com/MissouriSportsPod. Thank you, everyone, for listening. We will see you next year.